He was married in Wuhan, believe it or not. His name is Joe Hoft. He wrote the book, The Steal, The Deep State, Big Tech, Big Media, China, Absentee Ballots, United States Postal Service, nonprofits, rallies. What is going on? Well, he has delved into this, okay? Now, Joe Hoft is a former international corporate executive specializing in audit, finance, operations, and IT processes. He's overseen international audit and financial reporting teams for billion-dollar entities and lived in Hong Kong for a decade. He uses his skill sets and multiple degrees and designations to document and record in this book the numerous questionable and fraudulent activities and results in the 2020 presidential election. Well, I guess you and I are kind of on the same page. I just never felt in my gut that Biden legitimately won that election. Welcome to the broadcast.
Great to be here, Rhett. Thanks.
So Joe, you have written this book, The Steal. Is this your first book?
No, actually, it was my fourth book, and I wrote two more since then. So I've written 3 books on the Steal, volumes 1, 2, and 3, and the first book was about setting the stage, which you mentioned. It was all those things that led up to the election. The second book was on what happens. I called it The Impossible Occurs, and the third volume is the cover-up and all those things that had to take place to ensure that the Steal was successfully, that it would happen. And so, a total of 3 books.
Now, Rush Limbaugh said before he passed that the left doesn't really want to have elections. If I can quote from, I got here, it's the summary. Rush Limbaugh warned in the fall of 2020 that the Democrats were done with elections, sharing the following about Democrats and their mentors in the Communist Party, quote unquote. They don't think they should have to persuade anybody to agree with them. Therefore, they don't believe in campaigns. They don't believe in free, open exchange of ideas. There aren't any legitimate ideas outside of their own. They don't believe in giving legitimacy to anybody who does not already agree with them. Elections are about trying to persuade people to support you, and that's not what they're about. And it's terrifying to think. But I used to think that when my grandfather, he worked in New York City, I remember one time he was saying, well, he said, my heart's with the Democrats, but my brain is with the Republicans. Now, that was back 50 years ago. And that was when we thought the Democrats had hearts. But I got to be honest with this. Some of the most mean-spirited people I've run into in the past couple of years. I remember when Hillary was running against Donald Trump. And just the fact that I was not going to vote for her, I had many prosperous, successful people who were liberals or Democrats that blocked me and ended our friendship on Facebook.
Yeah, unbelievable. Unbelievable. That's happened to me now. I mentioned before the show here that I lost my account on Twitter on January 2nd of 2021, and so they didn't want me reporting on January 6th, that's for sure, and it was all due to a lot of reporting. I'll tell you a bit about my story. So as I mentioned there, as you read, I started off in the corporate world and worked my way up through a corporation in St. Louis. And then I had this amazing opportunity where I was able to fly around the world. They made me the international director over audit for this Fortune 500 firm. And we were growing geographically, and we were building these facilities, not facilities, but offices around the world in these great cities. We weren't in the backwoods or these small towns. We were in gorgeous cities.
And why would they fly you in? What was your job to do? To initiate something? Or?
Well, I think ultimately it was the board of directors wanted to make sure that these operations in these foreign countries were working as we would expect. They wanted to know if there's anything wrong, is there anything they need to know about. And they sent me from the U.S. overseas.
You're kind of like a financial detective?
Absolutely. Operations, finance,
Forensic.
and IT. And so I'd go out with a plan of what I was going to do and focus on certain areas, and come back with my reports to the audit committee, let them know. And I tell you what, if there's nothing wrong, which rarely happened, there was usually something we found, and not often just devastating stuff, but sometimes. But what I found was that the board really appreciates that. People want that comfort that things are working as intended overseas, especially overseas. So this was a great job for me. I flew around. I was single at the time. I went through a divorce in 2000, as we talked about briefly. And so I'm a single guy flying around the world. And I had 2 teenage daughters then at home. And it was a joy to get away from 2 teenage daughters for a while. And so I loved it. Everybody, I think, overseas thought I was just this great, happy guy because, no, you don't understand. I got 2 teenage daughters at home that I'm away from for a week. So that was those were good times. And my daughters enjoyed it, too, I think. They'd have somebody come stay with them. But
Funny is, I run into a lot of people, and there was a time I was traveling around the world doing a lot of interviews, whether it's Russia or Greece or wherever. I honestly, though, particularly now, I don't want to fly like I used to fly. It's not the fun it used to be. I mean, I can remember when I was a kid, you'd get on a jet, and you'd have, first of all, I'd wear a jacket and tie to go visit my grandparents in Texas, and I'd wear a jacket, a white shirt, and a tie, and everybody, even in coach, you were served real silverware. You were served a steak, a baked potato, a salad, a dessert. I mean, everybody, it's just, but now it's got, then all of a sudden, a few years later, I grew up and I went back to an airport, and nobody's dressed in jackets and ties anymore. They're all wearing these funky sneakers, and they're just it was, hey, look, it was $450 to go to California when I was 23. It's $450 to go to California now, and I'm 70. Something, so.
Wow, there you go.
They made it affordable for the proletariat, that's
there you
for sure.
Go. And that's what I did. I traveled the world. Then I met this girl in China on one of my trips through Hong Kong, and we ended up getting married. And so at that point,
where did you get married?
And we got married in Wuhan. There you go. And funny, people know where that city is today.
Yeah.
Nobody ever heard of Wuhan.
No.
And it was just a crazy. I remember when we landed, we took a taxi to the inner city to go to this place where we got our marriage license. There was people walking on that road. There was trucks. There was buses. There was taxis. There were animals on the side of the road. And this guy's just flying through all this. I was never so scared in a taxi in my life. The city's like 13 million. It's not a small city.
Now, how did you meet this Chinese girl?
Well, I was on a trip through Hong Kong, and I lined up something online before I went there. I was looking online, and sometimes if I knew I was going to be in a city, I'd actually see, well, maybe there's a young lady I could go out.
How much younger than you is she?
A few years. Well, we've got a kid now.
Oh, yeah, you have a son, right?
A son, he's 8, and
wow.
Soon to be 9, just gorgeous boy.
Why do a lot of American men, businessmen in New York City, they end up taking on a Chinese wife? And as a matter of fact, we actually had a student stay at our house for a while, a young man. We had an American kid at the same time. Well, the American kid's room was always a mess. The Chinese, he kept that place neat and orderly, and then he stayed in touch with us. We never heard from the other kid in Colorado. The Chinese kid still is in touch with us, and lovely. And my grandfather took in a little Chinese girl about 35, 40 years ago, and provided a bedroom in his apartment in New York City so she could go to NYU,
Wow. And then she'd play in the house or something. That's amazing. Yeah, that's great. No, I don't know what it is. I've met a lot of
So is your wife, would you say your wife is easier to get along with than an American woman?
I don't know if I want to.
The word would be subservient or something, or
You know what? I think there was I'll tell you this. The attitude that I got out of the U.S., from girls in the U.S., was a real entitlement kind of attitude. Like, well, what do you got? What can you give me? And that was kind of the attitude of the girls that I'd met after my divorce. And so there was something attractive about somebody. First of all, overseas was exciting, and there was something special about it.
Well, it's romantic.
Yeah, and
it
went both ways. It went both ways. I was just, tall Caucasian guy overseas, and a lot of girls like that, and so it was great.
Well, women, I think this is my hypothesis, but I think our theory, or whatever. that women like to marry out by nature. They're dictated to marry outside of the tribe, because if you marry within the tribe, then you have mentally ill kids. Just like up in the mountains, people that inbreed. You're not supposed to inbreed. So they naturally have a proclivity for something a little different. It's just like women. Women will try innovative foods, new stuff. They're much more. They'll take much more of a chance. Whereas men go, I want my baked potato and steak.
That's true. So we met. She ended up coming over to the States. It took about a year and a half through our immigration system, which is just broken. And I remember thinking of that, but this is before Trump. And but anyway, it was broken, and it took a long time. But during that time, I decided to move out of this position where I was flying all over the world and step into a role that I would be more closer to home. So the corporation I worked at, there was an opening overseeing this $1 billion block of business, and I did the financial reporting for that for 4 years then. Learned a lot. It was really hard work, but combined that with my expertise from flying around the world with operations and audits, etc. I was just learning. I just gobbling up information. And then the board asked that they wanted to have somebody over in East, somebody running an audit team overseas. Rather than sending people from St. Louis overseas, let's start building audit teams overseas. So I went over to Hong Kong, and for a decade ran the...
a decade?
Yeah, ran the, 9 years.
Wow.
The operations in Hong Kong for the functional area of audit for this Fortune 500.
So you had to learn the mannerisms, and did you learn how to bow, the whole bowing thing that goes down? Or?
I remember the first time I went to Japan, the guy who was running it, who was, he had me probably for an hour. He was teaching us about how to bow.
Yeah.
And there's a special way that you sit at a table and everything.
Well, it's true that you have to make, before you do business with someone, I was told, you have to make friends. That you somehow, just like in the Mideast, 3 cups of tea. The first cup of tea, the second cup of tea. By the third cup of tea, then you're considered a friend, and now we'll talk about business.
Oh, that's something. Now, I just think that people are excited to meet somebody from the States, and that made them feel special. It certainly made me feel special, and we had a great time. Japan was, all over the world, it was great. People were so nice. That was the thing. Professional. We didn't have many real messes. There were a couple entities that I went into that's like, man, this is a mess. We got to get this fixed. But overall, and I think people appreciate it. And here's what I learned too. The more mature people are, the higher up they are in an organization, the more they value audit. People on the bottom, they just don't want to be bothered. They got too much work to do. People on the top absolutely want to know that everything's working as intended. So I attended a number of audit committees around the world, a number of board meetings, which the audit committees are a part of, and then just relayed information from the work that we had done to these executives, and they'd wanted to know, from an independent source, what the heck's going on.
So you love numbers.
I was great with numbers. Always have been. Yeah.
I never was very good with numbers, but I have found out later in life, numbers are very comforting. For instance, let's say you owe a substantial amount of money. But then you go, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And you must know, if you break it down to monthly payments, you can get rid of the monster. And also, if you follow money, you go, wow, I didn't know I was making that much. And you realize, wow, numbers are definitely friendly. Isn't it amazing how there's a formula for everything, how mathematical God is? Look at a shell, a white shell you find on the beach. How is it that those lines are exact? I'm an artist. I can't do that with my hand.
Artists are good at numbers. Do you know that? Some of the best artists were really, like even the composers were great with mathematics.
Well, Dolly had the whole thing figured out with the dots. Matter of fact, if you take his famous painting of Christ on the cross and you squint your eyes, a docent showed me this, you'll see Abraham Lincoln. He knew what to do with the dots long before we had the dots. The modern TV, what do you call those dots?
Pixels?
Yeah, pixels. He knew pixels before there were pixels. It's crazy.
Wow. Well, I'll give you 2 examples where numbers kind of, they help me. So not just through my career in accounting and auditing, but also through I started, what happened was, I'm running this track in the corporate world. My twin brother, Jim, started this website. It was just a little blog. It was called, he named it the Gateway Pundit. And he ends up doing it every day for years. Didn't make anything, just found stories around the world, put them up. This is in 2004 or so. Nobody else was doing this really. A few entities. Jim decided to start his own website. But he just did it every day, and then he got some accolades. Some of these bigger sites would link to him, and that got him really excited. And then eventually people started coming to his site, and he built some volume. And eventually he stepped away from his job about 2 years after I went to Hong Kong. It's about 2013. And just did his website full time. And it's basically just him.
Well, how did the blog make him money?
Well, eventually he got it so big, and he was able to put these ads on the blog. And those ads can pay you big money if you get a lot of hits. It's based on hits. But the problem is, you'd better write things that Google authorizes you to write, basically. And so Jim, unfortunately, was writing a lot about politics from a conservative point of view.
Did that hurt him?
That hurt him. They started hitting him. And so he's had to get other avenues for advertising because Google would basically take him down. Facebook did the same thing. They after 2016, and I'll tell you this, so in 2016 I started writing for Jim. And I had this idea with numbers. I was looking at the results of the primaries with Trump and Cruz. That's all who was basically left. And I said to Jim, Cruz is going to be done at the end of this month. In early April, I said by the 27th, he'll be done. And Jim's like, what? And I go, well, I looked at the numbers, blah, blah, blah. There's not enough delegates left. At the end of the month, there won't be enough delegates for him to reach enough. And so we put it on. Drudge Report grabbed it and put it at the top of his site. Now, back then, Drudge was king. Now Drudge is gone and the dark side. I don't know what happened, if Soros bought it or what, but it's not what it was in 2016. And Drudge liked Trump. And I think there was concerted effort to take Drudge down because it was so powerful. It was the biggest website. If you got the top story on Drudge, you had the top story in the world. It was getting billions of hits, maybe a month. It was huge. And at the end of that month, I proved right. I almost got into the delegate. How many delegates Cruz would earn? Trump basically locked up the election at the end of April, and Drudge put my story up. And I'm just an audit executive in Hong Kong. I'm not a journalist. He put my story up the day before the primary, and then the night of the primary, he put my next story up. So I had the two biggest stories in the world.
What were the stories about?
Well, it was about Ted Cruz is eliminated. And they had this iconic picture of Ted Cruz eliminate Ted. And he was done. And I figured that out a month ahead of time. Another thing that I did was in 2020. So from that point on, I got hooked. I mean, I got the top story in the world. Are you kidding me? I'm telling all my friends at work are all executives, the top in Asia. Yeah. And they all knew I like Trump, and I'm writing for my brother. And I
so you discovered you had a voice, and you wanted to now go.
I loved it. And I like having, big hits, like home runs like that. And so that got me, and then I started backing Trump. I put an article up a day for about 4 or 5 years. Then came COVID. And what I did, I was in Hong Kong. We were actually in about 100 miles from Wuhan on January 1st of 2020, at my wife's parents' house. Can you imagine that? And at that point, we started realizing that the corporation I was at, this might be something big. We already had the protests that have been going on, and we've been managing that from the risk committee with these executives from the company I worked at in Asia. And we were already managing that, but now all of a sudden comes this thing, this pandemic or whatever it is out of China. I'm 100 miles from Wuhan when we really kind of realized we better start looking at this, like on January 1st, 2020. So they canceled the New Year, Chinese New Year, and then a couple months later we had the World Economic Forum, or not, the WHO telling us, the World Health Organization telling us this is going to be a 3.4% mortality rate. Now I'm all into mortalities and numbers and all sorts of stuff like that. I started looking at his numbers, Tedros, Dr. Tedros running the WHO, and I could see, no, he's wrong. It's going to be closer to the flu, 0.06. I could see the way he was conjuring up these numbers, what he was doing wrong. You could just see it. And so I reported on that. The first guy to report that The next day, Alex Jones had Jim and I on his show on InfoWars, and I'm in Hong Kong. Before us was this one guy, I think his name's Adams. He was saying, oh, we're all going to die. There's going to be 500,000, millions of us dead here. It's going to be tragic. It's going to be terrible. Everybody's scared shitless. Excuse me. And then, no, I saw that, no, this isn't going to be that way. I get on Alex Jones right after that guy said, no, I don't think so. Here's what's going on, blah, blah, blah. The numbers have been commingled, and here's why. It's going to affect the elderly and the sick. And so what I did was I put that up in an article. The next day I got doxxed by Media Matters. Now, Media Matters is in the news now, you might recall. Elon Musk is going after Media Matters. Doxed means D-O-X. Doxed means somebody grabs your personal information and throws it online. And what Media Matters did, and this is a George Soros-backed entity that John Podesta was connected to, this guy named David Brock, real sleazy characters. What happened is they didn't like my article. So they said, Joe Hoft, who works here in Hong Kong for this company, wrote this at the Gateway Pundit. So they doxed where I worked. And here I am, 20 years with this corporation, and my best friend, one of them, head of HR for all of Asia Pacific. I was the head of audit, he's head of HR. We've done work together. He calls me and says, we got to do lunch. He says, hey, you know, basically inform me I've been doxed, and now it's going to cause some challenges with my position. So they all love me and I love them, but through this exercise, I ended up retiring and coming back to the States. So Media Matters got what they wanted. They wanted to punish me for sharing the truth. Now, if you look back, look at this. The thing they needed more than anything with COVID was fear. They had to have us scared to death that this thing was going to kill us. And I just crushed it with one simple article. And it was so threatening that they had to crush me. Is that amazing? And it's all numbers. It was all numbers. I could see through this garbage. No, this is more like the flu. And I just saw on Twitter today a doctor, one of these great doctors, say, and they told us it was going to be 3.4%, but it's closer to 0.02. I was absolutely right.
So it was a big con.
It was a con, and Alex Jones had me on a show about a year later and said, Joe, you're the guy who uncovered COVID. He calls me the guy who uncovered COVID because I saw early on this stuff's not what they're saying it is. I had another post on numbers. You talk about numbers.
See, numbers don't lie.
They don't, and that's what happened. They had this thing where they're saying like 200,000 people have died from COVID, right? It was in the summer of 2020. And I started looking at that, and the numbers coming from the CDC, you can see all the data there. Here's the data. And only 6% of all those deaths were people that just died from COVID. Every other death was somebody that died from COVID and something. So you could be in a motorcycle wreck and have COVID. You could be a cancer patient and have COVID.
Well, it's not because the hospital's got an extra $30,000 bonus for every death that was COVID.
I think you're absolutely right. And funeral homes.
So the Democrats, through the government, were paying off people to say it was COVID.
That's right.
Scare tactic.
Yeah. And so what we found was only 6% had actually died from COVID. I put that article up all over social media. It was 6%. Everybody's calling themselves 6% Joe.
Yeah, and by the way, how come the next year nobody died of flu when there's normally there's a huge amount of people die of flu every year? Suddenly nobody died of flu.
Yeah, absolutely. It's because they had to bastardize these numbers to keep the fear to control. And I nailed that. And I look back, and I had about 10 fact checkers hit me on that and tell me I was wrong. The numbers came from the CDC. They're from the CDC. They're in my article. Here's the link. And yet I'm being attacked for this. So as I look back at two big articles that got a lot of attention from the evil ones from the left or whoever that might be, they both were posts that said this COVID is not as bad as what they're saying.
Well, I can understand people on the inner circle, but why would the media be swept up unless they're receiving checks?
That's absolutely right. I think that's what's happening. They get a lot of money, and boy, you better not step out of line.
And you think that's what happened to Drudge, perhaps? because they knew he had an influence. They said, look, how would you like to enjoy? We could either cut the brakes on your truck someday, somehow, somewhere you're not going to know it, or we're going to write you a check for $50 million. Go retire, enjoy your life. You've had your game, your fun, but or they pulled them aside and convinced them somehow that they have a greater plan for what's the thing that George Bush used to talk about?
Oh, the Great Reset, or the
One World Order.
New World Order. Yeah, it could be.
Do you think the Bushes? Now I've got people coming up with. Now my friend's father used to be the Reverend for the Bush family. The last time I was in Kennebunk, I actually went to church with George Sr. and Barbara, who was at St. Anne's and outside, and he and I always got along well. He had a great sense of humor. The son who was the president, George W., he has a little bit of a self-deprecating humor, Jeb and I, who I've interviewed, I never liked him. He, no sense of humor. Just very, you know what I mean? And I don't know. So, but anyway, people come to me now and they say that the Bushes were not as good as we thought they were. Do you think that's true? I mean, have you checked stuff out?
Well, I've never really thought. I was a fan. I thought they were great.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I guess over the last few years, maybe since Trump came on board, I'm starting to realize, well, maybe not.
But remember, we got to remember, Trump though was not too nice to Barbara on stage. Jeff.
No, he wasn't. And so they didn't like that. He said, remember the comment, Jeff? If you go any further, you're going to be off stage. And just crushed him. And there was a picture of Jeb standing there, his chin shaking. It's like he's ready to cry. Trump crushed those guys.
Yeah, but I have to say this on behalf. I was with Jeb, and Jeb was, I think he was a little cocky, arrogant with me. He thought he thought he was better than me. Mm-hmm. This was after he'd been governor.
Wow, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
So it doesn't at all. So I think we've been enlightened to a lot of things. One thing that happened under Trump, immediately asked for the release of the information on JFK. That's not all been released yet, and we're finding out for people like we mentioned earlier.
What do you mean JFK?
John F. Kennedy's assassination. There's these files he wanted to release, and the CIA still hasn't released them. There's like 3,000 documents they won't release related to JFK's murder. I've talked to Roger Stone, and he's written a book about that. He believes
it's all about the Fed, the money. It's about the money, right?
The CIA was involved. Bobby Kennedy Jr., I've heard him say recently, he's looked into his father's death, his assassination, his father, Bobby Kennedy. Since the guy that killed him wasn't in front of him. That was Saran Saran. Saran Saran, all his bullets were accounted for. His dad got hit in the back of the head. He said there's this CIA guy that he believes killed his dad, and his dad fell on him and grabbed his tie to kind of, this is who's killing me. And so you've got CIA involved there. Roger Stone says 3 of the 4 burglars in Watergate were CIA. And then you look at what happened to Trump, and that's what hit me. I thought, as I saw Trump and what his struggles with the deep state during his term, it reminded me of Nixon. It's like, what's going on here? The media is all pouncing on him. At the same time, you've got these bad actors in our government on both parties trying to get rid of this guy. And American people wanted him.
Well, they're having a party. Now, I was told from a friend that he went to the Senate cafeteria, $3.50. I happen to know the Senate cafeteria goes through approximately $2 million every month of crab and lobster. Okay? Why we the people? I mean, come on, what's going on here? And it says in the Constitution, they shall make no law that's not applicable to everybody, including themselves. And yet they don't have to pay into Social Security. Their children don't have to pay for college. It goes on. And they're never going to change it because they're the ones that have the power. And that's the left and the right. And just think about it. When they could mail out all that money, during COVID, people don't realize for every dollar you spend, and then somebody else picks it up down the street. I mean, the government probably makes, $400 a day on every dollar bill that's going around. It's so much money. It's just insane when they can give the money they've given to Ukraine so far. And I'm not saying it shouldn't go to Ukraine. I'm just saying the money they've given to Ukraine could pay every United States veteran $2 million.
That sounds.
None of our vets should ever be homeless, and their children should their college should be covered. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I just wrote a piece just moments ago. I got a website now called joehoft.com, and I still contribute to the Gateway Pundit. But I this piece on Biden. For some reason, he wants to send $25 million over to Ukraine again, and it's like, but at the same time, they're saying basically this thing's over. We got to start realizing that Russia's going to take part of Ukraine, and the new Ukraine is going to be different than what it was before. So all these deaths, all this money went to nowhere, and he's still sending $25 million over there. They're saying discretionary money that they could send his secretary.
Well, who's the president? Who's the president of Ukraine?
Zelensky, right?
Okay, so guess what? He just bought a multi-million-dollar home in Vero Beach, Florida. So I'm looking at my neighbor, so I'm up there. So the $32,000 that I just mailed to the IRS to pay my taxes, right, went right into his pocket to buy a house up the street that's bigger and better than my house.
Yeah, it's like in the millions. Million.
Yeah.
10 million or 4 million?
That's just ridiculous. Paying cash for a house? What the hell is going on here? Nobody reports on it.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. I've heard that as well. It's unbelievable. So I guess that was when I came back here, stepping back a moment, I came back to the States in 2020, a week after I left Hong Kong. They changed the law there that said if you write anything or say anything bad about China, we're going to send you to China. That law was instituted.
You send you to China? What do you mean?
Out of Hong Kong to China.
Oh, to
we're
jail.
Going to grab you.
Yeah.
And that happened 1 week after I left Hong Kong. So it was kind of a God thing, too, that I got out of there.
You could end up in a Chinese prison.
I was writing articles about China's economy. Trump was crushing China's economy, and their economy still hasn't recovered, by the way. They base their economy 25% on real estate.
Well, they don't want Trump back in office. A lot of people don't want Trump in office. Okay, so what do you think? Can we have an honest election? In your book, The Steal, it's all about stealing the election.
Yep.
You dedicated an entire book. By the way, this book's available everywhere. Joe Hoft, The Steal, Setting the Stage, Volume 1 is Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. That's available here. Now, the deep state, big tech, big media, China. Now, I just want to see some things that stuck out here that I was reading. The Democrats had found their strategy for success. It involved having mail-in ballots across the state and allowing anyone to legally drop off anyone else's ballot into drop boxes. So it could be contaminated.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big part of their strategy.
How did you do your research for all this stuff?
Well, a lot of it was through a lot of my writings at Gateway Pundit. So I was writing daily for 5 years, every day. And then when I came back to the States, I started writing full time. I could write up to 10 articles a day at that site. And when I came back, we were getting 500,000 hits a day, which is pretty good. By the time January came along of 2021, we were up to 5 million hits a day. We'd grown tenfold. We were crushing it because I was, I think I take a lot of credit, Jim and the team, but there's only 3 or 4 of us at the time, and not even that really. Me, Jim, and another girl. And the stuff I was throwing up was all original. I had these executives around the country after the election. These guys reached out to me. One guy, senior actuary at a major company, contacted me, says, Joe, look at this. And he showed me the numbers from Pennsylvania, and I put those in my second book on the impossible occurs. This pattern. Trump beats Biden 2 million to 1 million on election day. That's how bad it was. He crushed Biden. What happens in the next 3 days, they lock the door. They don't let anybody in. That's the first chapter in my book on the impossible occurs, is that it was over when they didn't let observers see what was going on. I mean, and in the corporate world, man, you've got to be transparent on everything. If I stepped into an audit committee...
How come somebody hasn't raised their ire about this and what's going on?
Well, a lot of people are. Well, here's the numbers. The polling shows that 62% of Americans now think that the election in 2020 was stolen. 62% per Rasmussen. So people are seeing it. It's through word of mouth. It's through sites like this.
Yeah, but they've already got it set up so they're going to steal the next election.
I know. We've got a lot of work to do between now and 2020.
What's the work that needs to be done?
Well, there's a lot. Everything. this system is still in place. It's even worse. There's new systems that I mentioned in my third book on the called the non-election system secret. These new systems, they're not calling them election systems, so they don't comply with any of the election laws. They're totally non-compliant, and they've got a whole system set up right now on the cloud that this is where our elections are being done now. And I'm telling you, the cloud's it's not secure. The stuff is not secure. And I was on OAN last night with Dan Ball, and he asked me this, and I said, here's the deal. If I walked into a board of directors meeting or an audit committee of a board, and I said, well, here's the deal. Our systems are not secure. Bad actors could get in, and they could flip an election. If I said that to somebody, a board, they shut that down right now. It's not even an issue. You can't have systems that lack security. Same thing with the data. You can't lock people out.
So how are we going to take this back?
Well, it's a good question. I'll tell you what I'm doing. I've started a group together and of professionals.
Yeah.
And some really smart people, really smart. And what we've done, and I'm working on it now over the Christmas holiday, is we've decided we're going to map out the election process. We want to grab everything. And then we're going to figure out what from that process is broke, which right now it seems like about half of everything is pretty well broke. And then we're going to have to figure out, okay, of that broke stuff, what can we fix before 2020?
If there's a Soros, can't you get funding? I mean, there's some really conservative individuals who've come up from the bottom up in America that would maybe fund an investigation. You know?
Yeah. Well, we don't have a site yet, but we do have a nonprofit that I set up. It's called Fate 2024. Fate stands for Fair and Transparent Elections. And so we got that.
Fair
I actually,
and transparent.
I went in, believe this or not, I went into a bank the other day that I bank at to set up an account for this entity.
Yeah.
And they turned me down. They called me back the next day and said, well, we don't want to get into politics. Like, politics, this is a civic duty. We want to have a fair, transparent.
This is what kind of account you have.
And so they told me no. So I'll be looking for another bank there in the next few weeks, but we're going to get it. We'll get that set up. But anyways, yeah, we've got to figure out, first of all, this is how we would attack it from the corporate world. Put together your total population. What's your universe? Then figure out what's going on in that universe. Figure out what's broke, and then from that, isolate on those areas that are broke, and figure out ways with the current environment where you've got crooked people in crooked positions. You've got systems that don't work, that aren't secure. You've got processes that are broke, and we got to go through all that and figure out how can we save this next election, because I think it's going to be a miracle. I really do. Only a miracle will save this country. I really believe that's how bad these systems are.
Well, long before I knew you, long before all this was going down, here's little Rhett Palmer with his little show for 29 years in Vero Beach, Florida. And when President, Clinton was president, I had these world-class economists come in. And they said that the world works better, the economy, the United States economy works better when we have a balance. Okay. So even somebody who has their head screwed on straight, even if they're a Democrat, should understand they're killing the country if they subjugate and they keep turning these elections. Like, I don't believe that lady lost in Arizona.
No.
For the governorship?
No way.
Are you kidding me? Never in a million, never in a billion, never in a million years. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And everybody's just kind of letting it go.
Yeah, it's unreal. It's unreal. Well,
this elegant, classy, highly educated, perfect woman for the position.
Yeah,
the thing is, what happened here is Trump is the perfect man for the hour. And I'll tell you why. Well, people are going to be aghast right now. Oh, don't hang up. Don't stop listening if you're a Democrat or whatever. So the Bible says, put fire to the field, and you'll see what comes out of it. Now, I always took that meaning character. In other words, you and I are buds, but all of a sudden we go through a struggle together, and you see my real character has flaws in it, because it reveals the trying times, reveal my true character. But Also, it reveals what's going on. And it's not just applicable to finding out about human nature. Trump was God's man with his big, stupid mouth. Now, I voted for him. I was the first one in Indian River County. I got very wealthy people said, man, head to the former sheriff, all these other people. They all came on board after a while. Now, Trump was stupid. I mean, talking about grabbing the ladies, this, doing that, and all that stuff he goes, and I was saying, oh my God, what's this guy doing? And he has a big, I mean, even like saying, like, the only heroes are the ones that don't come back, about, what's his name? McCain. Come on. Stop it. You know, then people say, well, McCain gave away information. I don't know if there's any validity to that. But whether there is or not, he fought for our country. He's a hero. Okay, so why does he say this stupid stuff? And I interviewed General Colin Powell. Now, I like General Colin Powell. We spent a good time together, just like you and I, and we became friendly. Okay, so Colin Powell dies. The next day, Trump's on TV and stuff, putting calm. You don't attack somebody who's dead that can't defend themselves, or at least wait 6 months, not the day after. What in the world's the matter with that man? But here's my take. Trump is a genius. We know that. Economically, he's the best thing for the country. But there's an old saying, people don't care what you know till they know how much you care. He comes off with that crusty not caring. This is conjecture on Rhett Palmer's part again. I think somebody heard him, because with Donald Trump, like if he heard me say the things I just said, he'd never want to be my friend. Although I will be one of Donald Trump's best friends one day. If he meets me, we are going to click. I know that. Because he was hurt. And that's why he's good with you. But if you throw a pebble his way, he will unleash hellfire on you. Have you noticed that? But also he reconciles. He reconciled with that lady who had the show, who was, when they had the debate, the pretty blonde who now has her own show on another channel. Yeah. I mean,
from Fox.
Yeah, and he went and just gave her an hour interview. I mean, so they've made up.
Yeah.
But he has some quirks. But I think God's in charge of everything, to the point where even God put that in here, because he was the first one to say fake news, and it's true.
Yeah, let me say something to that.
Yeah.
I have a friend that says this. The only thing that they could get to stick on Trump, they've got all these cases. None of them. They're all BS. There's no
bogus.
They're garbage. They've got all that. The only thing they could stick to him is he's mean. Think about it. That's the only thing. And quite frankly, if somebody did to me what they did to him, I've been pretty well ticked off too. I mean, he steps in. He's sitting there. He's believing Obama when Obama says it's a transition. We're going to do this. At the same time, Obama's behind his back, spying on him, working up, conjecturing this Russia collusion sham, because they're all scared, because they're afraid they're going to be in jail when they get caught with the things they did. So they've gone all in, they're still doing.
But this is what's dangerous, because he was in there for 4 years. He had been the CEO. He didn't realize he was no longer CEO. He was the president. It's a different set of rules. And remember, he had these people at return codes, not loyal to him like they would have been in business, because he's writing the checks, right? Well, guess what? He's had 4 years to heal of all that, to chew on it and contemplate. Remember, somebody who only needs 3 hours sleep a night.
But listen,
they get 5 more hours of sleep every night. Every 10 nights, that's 50 hours. That's 150 more hours of awake time every month.
Well, one of my first chapters actually is the deep state. In my first book. It's about how these guys planned this whole scam against Trump, the Russia collusion. This guy by the name of Norm Ison's involved in it. I just wrote a piece about Norm this morning at my site, and I share about how Norm, he's still going after Trump. He was behind the Russia collusion. He was behind all these lawfare cases where they tried to block his policies. How many times did he have to go to court over the wall or over all these other things? They attacked him on everything he did. It got way out of bounds. We've never seen anything like this before. Then they come up with an impeachment. Then they come up with another one. Then they steal an election.
They were relentless. Who's the pencil thin guy?
They're still that way.
The guy with the pencil neck.
Yeah, pencil neck. Shift. Yeah.
He's a shifty guy. With a name like Shift, he's a shifty guy. He's creepy. You know, I've met people in my life, like when I was at private school when I was a kid, and there'd be a kid you just know something's right. He's shifty. Shift's a perfect name. I don't know what your name means. My name means Rhett. I'm Rhett. Rhetorical. Do you think it's any mistake that that's my name? Rhetorical, and I make a living with my mouth, and I didn't even choose my own career. The Lord God above gave it to me. You know, here you say, the deep state. Here it says, he said, every day the media and those politicians who hated Donald Trump, Democrats and Republicans worked with the deep state to have him removed from office. Their weapon of choice was the Russia collusion lie that was later confirmed as being created by Hillary Clinton's gang. And we're talking about who's the guy that interviewed Romney. And here I thought Romney was my American guy. I voted for him. I interviewed him. I will say this, though. I also interviewed his wife. I'd have his wife as president before I'd ever have him as president.
Oh, wow.
She was real. I love her. She's a sweetie and very bright. Same thing with the guy who was the vice president under Bush. Potatoes. How do you spell potatoes? Quail.
Quail. Dan Quail. Yeah, right.
Yeah, you did. I tell you what, I don't think highly of myself. But before Dan Quayle, the only difference between Dan Quayle and me, he was vice president because he inherited $500 million. His wife should be the president. He had nice guy, sweetheart of a guy. But I should be vice president, and I should never be vice president. But I should be vice president for Dan Quayle. So you know, it's a funny thing of money. The bed. What is that old saying? Money. Business makes for strange bedfellows or whatever.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, so Noah, this is, by the way, this is his book, and I want you to listen, folks. Joe Hoft, H-O-F-T, because I have a friend that's Hoft, H-A-U-F, but H-O-F-T, John Hoft, H-O-F-T, The Steel, Volume 1, Setting the Stage. Okay, he also has the Steel number 2, The Impossible Occurs, Access Denied, Impossible Results, The Drop and Roll, Chain of Custody, Ballot Authenticity, System Compliance, Systems Issues. You know, they can't refute this guy because this guy worked for this guy sitting next to me right here, Joe Hoft, worked for major corporations. Really, you're a forensic guy. This is the perfect. You're the guy. I think you're God's man for this. And I think your best writings have yet to come.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
Don't thank me. I had nothing to do with it, kid.
Well, I got to tell you, and we talked about numbers earlier, some of that the drop and roll was something that we discovered. In this data, and this I mentioned about this guy from Pennsylvania reaches out to me, there's a pattern in the data. Trump's up 2-1 on election day. They shut the door, they come up with these absentee ballots, and in every county there's a proportional difference between absentee ballots to election day ballots across the board in the same ratio. And you can see it. It's a straight line. It should never be there.
What about that common American truck driver who said, I've been running. That's rig number 4852. I got a family. I'm young. He's in his 30s. He said, I've been doing this for 15 years. Every night I pick up that. And he said, all of a sudden my truck with the ballots, they used it for the ballots, and my truck disappeared. That's the thing they pull. Not the engine part. The other part. Disappeared. And they just poo-poo it and move along.
I talk about that in my third book, which is on the cover-up. And Bill Barr was involved in that. And my friend Tony Schaefer was part of the team. He vetted this Jesse Morgan guy, who was the truck driver, young guy in the program. He was in recovery. He was had gone to prison for some drug sales or something like that in the past. Got out, got recovered. Had a good job driving a truck for the post office in and out of New York every day, and he's got 2 or 3 little daughters. And he says, when this election comes out, he says, I got to tell you, I dropped this trailer off in the parking lot. It was full of ballots. It was a week or 2 before the election, and I don't know what happened to my trailer. I went there the next day, and they were gone. Tony Schaefer, my friend, who's also one of us, and a former military guy who's written a number of books, and he was helping with the team to vet all this in Pennsylvania. He vetted Jesse Morgan. And Jesse risked everything because he said his daughters didn't know that he'd ever gone to prison. And by coming out with this, he knew the media would out him on that. They would dox him on that in front of his daughters, and they'd have to learn that Daddy went to prison. He did it anyways because he felt it was right. Tony vets him. He gets a hold of Edward Meese, who used to be the Attorney General for Reagan. That's a friend of Tony's. Edward gets a hold of Bill Barr. Bill Barr calls Tony. Tony tells me this whole story a couple times now. Says what happened is Barr calls him up, starts screaming at him, saying, you need to stop. You need to end your investigation now, and I want to know where this guy is. And Tony says, I'm not telling you. I don't trust the FBI, and this guy's a whistleblower. Bill Barr wouldn't have any of it, told him to stop it, screamed at him for 20 minutes, and hung up. The next day, Tony got kicked off the team. Jesse Morgan, the FBI did show up at his house. They didn't ask him anything about what happened. They asked him who's paying him. That's our FBI. And this guy to this day, I think, lives in fear, concerned that someday the FBI is going to knock down his door, like they do to these people now, to stand up for the truth. Jesse Morgan was scared into being silent. The report came out 2 years later, about a year ago, and it validated what Jesse Morgan had said. So, and they doxed half of the information in that report, so you can't even read it. But this is the kind of thing. Bill Barr was not there to help us. He's a Republican.
Well,
he's working for Trump.
I just interviewed. I met a young man in his early 20s, and he said they're no longer teaching us history in school. That way, they don't know. Those who don't know history are destined to repeat it.
Yeah.
They have no idea about it. They have no idea about the Jews. Look at these people coming forward for Palestine. What kind of crap is that?
I agree.
And they get this stuff on Facebook, and they believe it. And have they not seen the Holocaust? Are they not aware of the Holocaust? I never, ever thought I would see this prejudice against the Jews suddenly. They've got to be baffled. And half my family's Jewish. They've got to be scared to go anywhere. Look at the Jewish students. And what do you think of that president of Harvard? She needs to be ousted.
She sounds like she's
not
very
even,
honest.
she's not college material, frankly.
It sounds like she ended up like doctoring information or stealing information in some of her reports. She's a phony, and there you have it. And what's she even doing in that role? And it sounds like she's an anti-Semite like the rest of these people.
There's only one good thing that you and I are talking here.
Yeah.
You believe in Jesus as your Lord and Savior, without a doubt, right?
Yes.
You believe you were born again, you got a conversion?
Yes.
Okay. So I know that I have. And one thing about God is He's the last-minute God. Now, do you know the story about Gideon? Gideon was this little man, and he comes up and says, "Oh, Gideon, might of the angel of the Lord, oh, mighty man of valor." He's hiding downstairs. He goes, "What do you mean, oh, mighty man of valor?" He's a scaredy cat. But anyway, God uses him to take over Jericho, right? I mean, it's a long story, folks, but he even gets all these soldiers, and they come to water, and the ones that lay down on their belly and lap up the water, he keeps with the ones that just leaned over, and God says, get rid of all of them. So it's brought down to a skeletal crew. And then the Lord says, now at the appointed time, go around the city and make a circle, and you're going to light these torches. And they're going to think there's many more. They ended up, the bad guys, I guess it was the Syrians, all woke up, and they started slaughtering each other, thinking and they won. The Lord likes to show His strength. And in the end, God is God. Because I could get really upset the way it's going. I am just shocked
Me too.
at the evil going on, and how come people have no conscience? What in the hell is going on?
Yeah.
But I tell you what, we've spoken a lot today. I hope you'll come back again and talk more in the future. But pick up his trilogy. At least pick up his first book, and then you're going to want to pick up the other two books, as I did. Joe Hoft, The Steal, okay, Volume 1, setting the stage. The Steal. That's all you need to remember, and it's well written. I even as I talk about books, I like the font. I like the white space. This might not mean much to you, but as a guy who's a publisher of a magazine and been involved in publishing, it's just so well put together. I don't know who did this for you. Maybe it was you, but this guy is a forensic, mathematical scientist of sorts, and the numbers don't lie.
They don't. And there's patterns in the data that shouldn't be there. There's other places patterns should be there. They're not. And once you know that, and once you've dealt with big data sets, like I have in the past, huge data sets, you could see it, you could find it, and it clearly there's something that went on here that's not right. And we already, it's so broken. That was my thesis. I shared this last night on OAN. The reason this election was stolen is because it never should have been certified. In the corporate world, we never would have accepted this. We never would have said, hey, this is
so
okay.
Pence should not have signed off on it.
Never.
So he did do us a disservice.
He
and then he
absolutely
turns
did.
around and says, that he wanted to break the Constitution, that Trump wanted him to break the Constitution?
No.
What is the truth here?
Well, I think you. So what he's saying is it's okay for me to certify fraud because the Constitution tells me to. I would argue no, the Constitution would never tell you to certify fraud. And that fraud, anything in the business world that contains fraud, is non-certifiable.
Well, Pence, not only for the fraud, but Pence fried himself.
Oh, he did. He's done.
No, he's toast.
I wrote about him that morning on January 6th. I said today he's going to be a hero or Brutus, and he ended up being Brutus, I think. And we saw his true colors. And I wrote that piece later in the day. Well, it looks like he's Brutus. General Flynn writes me and says, Joe, you're absolutely right. Because I started looking back and I go, Mike Pence was involved in Flynn's leaving within a week of the Trump's administration. Pence and Reince Priebus got together and conjured the story up to Trump saying that Flynn lied and they forced him out. And Trump needed Flynn because Flynn knew the bad guy. And they had to get him out of there. It was all coordinated from the start. And Pence seems to be right in the middle of it from the start to the finish.
Just like Romney. They were already called them rhinos.
Yeah.
So many rhinos. Okay, we're going to take a break for today. As I said, we've been talking with Joe Hoft. The title of the book is The Steal 1, The Steal Volume 2, The Steal Volume 3. Pick it up if you want to know about the cover-up. He's a forensic scientist of math, and he'll tell you the truth. And the truth shall set you free. This is the mayor of the airwaves. Who loves you, baby?